I struggled a lot with my ADHD whilst building a career in the city of London, working for fintechs.
You're incredibly well qualified, master's degree level, yeah, multilingual. Many old school commentators would say, well, you can't have ADHD because you've achieved so much.
You will get into a point in life where you hit a dead end, a wall, which is saying, you can't be like this. You don't have the right to exist.
Did you get that?
And that's why I went on writing a petition for the Parliament to consider a fast track for ADHD and autism diagnosis and treatment.
That's almost like your purpose back, because you talk about that void.
Exactly.
Just you can see the passion coming through there.
Yeah.
No one should go through what you've gone through. You didn't have this experience with the NHS.
Exactly. It was like, oh, I belong. I have a root here.
From bullied at school to having your question debated in the UK Parliament. That's one hell of a journey, Marie. It really is.
Marie Weidlich, looking forward to this, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you give us a bit of a kind of a backstory, if you like, so people, anyone watching, listening, can learn a bit about you before we start?
Sure, yes. So I am a marketeer. I work in the financial services here in the UK for the past decade, and that's what I do for a living. But my story, it's not as obvious as this may sound. I actually am a Brazilian immigrant, not by passport, obviously, because my family is German and Italian. But I grew up and spent most of my life in Brazil. When I was 27, I moved to London unknowingly that I had ADHD. I didn't know I had ADHD when I did that move. And I think my ADHD really supported that, because if you are neurodiverse, you will probably relate to the fact that there's quite a lot of energy and passion, and you're eager to do things and just go without thinking much about it. I wouldn't say impulsive, but perhaps that's one trait. And that brought me to here. But also the other aspect of myself, which is I could never fit in where I grew up for many reasons, even the ones that are a little bit more obvious. But I grew up with that void, right, that I think anyone that is neurodiverse will relate to, because no matter how much you try, no matter how much you want to be, you will get into a point in life where you hit a dead end, a wall, which is saying, you can't be like this. You don't have the right to exist.
Did you get that?
I got that quite a lot.
Yeah.
Growing up, it was tough.
Was that more from a school point of view, or is that coming into a career? Because that one size does not fit all at school is a key part. We've had many people sitting here that, in fact, Alex Partridge described it as a trauma factory for anyone neurodiverse in a school environment, just not made for it.
Absolutely. I consider myself a survivor because I spent 7 years of my life suffering bullying every single day at school. I was a tomboy, I was chubby, and I wore glasses because, as well as having ADHD, I have macular degeneration. So I grew up with a very, very high myopia, which required very thick glasses.
Yeah.
And when I showed up at school, I was a very vibrant and empathetic kid. I was always on the forefront, running with ideas and colors, and I was bubbly. Mm-hmm. But I had that outlook that really didn't fit in. Where I grew up in Brazil, it's a very European-orientated culture. It's in the border with Argentina and Uruguay, so you have all this heritage that is trying to fit in a tropical country, but has a very, very European mentality. So the cute girl at school was the skinny blonde girl with blue eyes. And I was never that girl. So growing up at school as a tomboy and also being neurodiverse, I couldn't find a place that I felt loved or that I belonged, because I was called the most pejorative names. I remember the boys calling me Cabal from Mortal Kombat. So if you're a millennial, you grew up in the 90s, you probably played Nintendo console, you will know what these names mean. I don't know actually if Cabal is from Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, but it was just Monster, right? And I'm coming home and telling my mom, the boys are calling me that. Oh yeah, we're gonna go and speak to the tutor, to the headmaster. So I am at the headmaster office every Friday because I did something wrong. And the headmaster comes to me and take my glasses off because she wants to look in my eyes to speak to me. And that was, well, I only came to realize the weight of that as a grown-up person. So all these moments growing up were quite tough, which also supported me to become very resilient. And I think everyone who is neurodiverse has mastered resilience. You have to.
Or doesn't, and suffers because of that lack of resilience, perhaps. Many adults, I think we find many adults, the suicide rate within ADHD is incredibly high, and perhaps not. You've mastered resilience, and you can feel it as you talk, and those days at school, clearly, the ADHD, the eyes, the glasses, you've been able to build resilience. I would suggest that there have been times in your life, let's just look at, where you didn't feel that resilience, and most adults we speak to, especially females, have suffered with anxiety and depression along their journey prior to diagnosis.
Absolutely.
Is that you?
Yes. Well, I probably struggled with my mental health most of my life, without a North Star, without knowing why, and feeling that void coming around me and saying, you can't be happy. You're happy now, but this is not going to last long. Mm-hmm. There will be a week you will fall, and it's coming. So I was used to live in that roller coaster. But as a kid or as a young person, if you're a teenage, you don't understand that. You don't have the tools or the mechanism to understand what that means, how you should feel. You're just trying really hard to belong and to become. So when I was 9 years old, I lost my grandpa for suicide. And he wasn't just my grandpa. He was my favorite person, my best friend. He was the person who saw me for what I was. He taught me how to write in a typewriter, and that became obviously my passion in life. So losing him drowned myself and probably a lot of people in my family into that place of sadness and hopelessness. And I had seen psychologists. I didn't understand why I was there, because I was always like, oh, okay, they're asking me to draw something. That's not what a neurodiverse kid needs. A neurodiverse kid needs a routine and needs to be accepted the way they are. If I need this cup to be here, why society is telling me that it shouldn't, if this is my need. So I struggled a lot to understand those boundaries, to understand what my needs were. And I think I probably really grabbed everything I could in terms of resilience, but also looking at the positive side, but also connecting or finding where I would belong. And that occasionally happened in academia. When I started my BA in journalism, I really felt that I was around people that were like-minded and that accepted me for who I was. But that with a caveat, because for who I was as the personality that I was becoming, or the person that I wanted or thought I was.
And projecting that into that environment. We talked off camera. I'm going to spin that forwards a little bit about, there's a beautiful story about how you came to get your diagnosis for ADHD. And I think it's worth spinning forwards to that, because I think for many adults, yourself included, that becomes a seminal moment of life, doesn't it? A pivot point.
Yeah. It reframes a reflection on so much, doesn't it?
It does.
And your diagnosis was really recent in context as well. So
Yeah.
So tell us about the walk you were on with a friend who's autistic, and how that came to be that pivot point for you.
Sure, yeah. So we were walking in the city in a beautiful July summer day, and I just left a company, and I'm between jobs. I'm probably not really aware that I struggled a lot with my ADHD whilst building a career in the city of London, working for fintechs. I didn't really respect my needs within that time frame. And perhaps that's where I was in that moment in time where I'm changing jobs again, and what's happening from here. And my friend came to me and said, I'm pretty sure you have ADHD. He was on a journey to try and understand himself. He came across ADHD 360, where he started his treatment. He went on Elvens right after diagnosis. And he was telling me how wonderful that experience was for him, not because he thought that it was just about himself. He wanted me to feel that way as well. And he hinted that I should go and try a diagnosis. That's when I came to terms with the diagnosis. But it was funny because I didn't want to think about that. And I think part of the neurodiversity journey is I feel different. I can't fit in. I am masking 100% of the time, but I don't want to talk about this.
Yes.
Let's keep life going. And I was like that. I'm going 250 miles per hour. And please don't tell me about my insecurities and my weaknesses. Let the world know the best version of myself.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Your articulation is beautiful.
Yes.
And I think that's where I use that word reflection. That's how I was able to, so 250 mile an hour, face forwards, it's been chaos to get to here. Not quite sure how I've got to here, which actually really take your point earlier about the fact that so many people don't make it through that, which is heartbreaking. So if you can survive, you can then try and thrive. And I think that's a parallel. But using that word reflection, when you got the diagnosis, was there a moment where you did stop and you did then look back and start to piece what's a very jumbled up jigsaw puzzle and start putting pieces together? And what did that look like? Because that's a big parallel for me.
I think it was like being born again, or having a second chance of waking up and seeing everything through different lenses. This is what having a diagnosis meant to me. I'm not talking about treatment. It's really saying you were like this because of that. You have the right to exist in your own terms. That was liberating for me, because I couldn't belong to anything. Now, with a diagnosis, I know why.
Yes. Yeah.
And I can be empathetic with myself. I think empathy is really important in someone's journey when they're trying to figure things out, because we are very open and empathetic with other needs. We have taught to be like that, or we must comply to be like that. But how about our needs? How to be empathetic with yourself? When I had a diagnosis, I could do that for the first time in life.
And I think that's one of that comes out in the interviews that we do time and time again, doesn't it? That whilst there's controversy about the NHS's capability to assess and diagnose and treat people. What we're missing by not being able to do that is giving people that opportunity to suddenly empathise with themselves and be at one with that, whether that leads to medical treatment or not. And certainly, I know I watched that with you and other people that have been on the programme that have been diagnosed.
Forgiveness, would that be a word that calls it?
The ability to forgive, the ability to articulate. Now I know. Now you know why school was difficult, why you were being bullied, for want of a word, why you had anxiety about those things that you discussed, and
the void as well.
And then that void of never being able to fill that void of why am I not good enough? Why can I not achieve like other people? And I think we don't articulate this enough.
No.
We articulate that we have a set of criteria for ADHD in the DSM, and we articulate that it's hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention. But that's all nonsense. What really matters is how you've articulated, because every person we speak to has felt those feelings. They manifest differently, because every person with ADHD is their person with ADHD, but you've articulated it really well. If I can, stay with that for a second. You went to a private sector company for your assessment and diagnosis. I'm going to ask you a very challenging question. How was that for you, that process?
It was great. It was wonderful. I felt that I was being guided. I mean, I am picky with tech and digital user experiences because of what I do for a living, but I don't think that matters. I think what matters is how I felt during that journey, and the outcome of it. And the outcome was that within 2 months since I decided, okay, I'm going for the diagnosis, and then obviously I was allocated to a practitioner that had over 25 years experience within ADHD diagnosis. I did, and I think that's really important, and is also an opportunity to establish a global footprint. Outside the UK, I don't see this happening often from what people, from who I speak with, especially my family in Brazil. The diagnosis is still very much based on a psychiatrist aspect of it. So you have to go to a medical psychiatrist to get your diagnosis, or you have to, and that's not an analytical test. Going through that battery of tests and then having an interview it felt reassuring, because it gave me confidence that this is actually going to tell me the truth, right? It's not someone that is looking at my traits or what I'm telling them, or that really depends on their own judgment at the end of the day, right? The tests were really key to the success rate of my diagnosis. And I remember clearly one of the tests was staring at a screen with these shapes. It was a square, it was a triangle, it was a ball, and I couldn't help myself finishing that test. At some point I gave up. I'm looking outside the window, I am doing anything but looking at those shapes. And my rate at that test was somewhere between 30 and 35, which clearly for the practitioner, it was like, okay, this person probably has ADHD. And I repeated the test within that journey, because obviously after I got my diagnosis, I went on treatment, I had my check-ins, and I did the test again. And I improved to 70%. And I was like, I thought it was nice to have that metric, that, that success metric in place, because it really made me measure that from an analytical point of view.
And it revalidated the journey you'd put yourself on, I presume.
Exactly.
Let me ask you, there's a lot of rhetoric, media commentary about the lack of thoroughness of the private sector compared to the NHS. How thorough do you feel the process was for you to get to your diagnosis?
I can't relate to that at all. And I can't relate to that as being something that I hear from people I know. I was in 6 months of treatment with the private practitioner, and they then told me I was ready to get into the NHS system. So they would be basically following up with my treatment from a share care agreement perspective. I then waited weeks to get my treatment from the GP. I had to fight every single month for a prescription. They didn't accept my share care agreement. It was lost in the pipe of this of the GP itself. It felt it's a system that clearly is overwhelmed for a latent reason, and we all know that. And it's not only for ADHD. So when I got to that point in my journey, I really felt that resilience had to come back and say, I need to fight for this, not only for myself, but for perhaps going back to what we were talking about, understanding this early in life. For kids and for teenagers, they can change someone's life outcome, right? So I need to
bigger than you, right?
I felt that moment. I was eager and looking so much for finding that moment where I really connect with something that is bigger than me.
That's almost like your purpose back, because you talk about that void.
Exactly.
Just you can see the passion coming through there.
Yeah.
No one should go through what you've gone through. You didn't have this experience of the NHS and the overwhelm, and that's heavily publicised, but actually more can be done.
Exactly. It was like, oh, I belong. I have a root here. And then I'm walking, I'm falling, because I'm back to the place. I don't care about you. I don't care about your diagnosis. I don't care if you need treatment. This is what reality is. We'll say the system is here and it doesn't care about you.
So in reality, and I'm being very, very clear here, when you turn to a sector that was able to help you, you got the empathy, you got the clarity, you got the help, you got the support. When you went back into the public system, that fell away for you, and you had to fight and you had to advocate for yourself to get back to where you are.
Yes.
Now, that could be seen as Phil Anderton arguing for the sector that he's come from against us, but let's not look at it that way. Let's look at where that took you, because that took you then to start petitioning for change and start to actually use all of your professional skills, your professional qualifications, because you're incredibly well qualified, master's degree level, multilingual, bright as a button, articulate, all of those things. Many old school commentators would say, well, you can't have ADHD because you've achieved so much. But what they don't get is the battle that you've had to go through within yourself and within the systems, with multi-nations, to get to where you've got to. And thank goodness the UK was able to be there for you. So you can now be the best version of yourself. Now you've applied all of that to petitioning government for change. What is that change that you've petitioned for? Because I think this is really vital to take us around an experiential learning cycle to the now what of why you, and what is your void filling purpose now? And I'm excited to hear from you what it is you're petitioning for.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, after having this experience with the NHS, I was walking back home and remembering of my school days, when I was at the library because I did something wrong and my colleagues are somewhere else playing or exercising or doing ball games. And I thought about how many kids are in that situation right now. I'm heading home. I'm an adult. I have the support I need at this point in my life. But at this time, how many other people were suffering this? How many kids are having that feeling that they don't have the right to exist in their own terms? And how many teenagers are really degrading themselves in situations they shouldn't be in, just because they are not allowed to be understood. And I think asking to be understood, it's something that seems quite simple, but in truthness, I believe it can be revolutionary, because we need to do this for many people out there. And that's why I went on writing a petition for the Parliament to consider funding a fast track for ADHD and autism diagnosis and treatment. So it happened in that week. I literally came home, opened my laptop and started writing, and I said, I need to do something about it. Yeah.
And how well received was that? Because we talked about empathy, and we talked about how many people you turned to me when we heard Marie's story, and the kid that feels like a bad kid at school, but they're not a bad kid, but they're being punished when their friends are playing for not being able to concentrate or not being able to fit in.
Yeah.
How well received was that petition?
I think the petition was really well received, surprisingly. Obviously, I have a pretty hectic life, and as much as I would like to really focus on promoting the petition and getting signs for it, it felt, personally felt that I wasn't doing enough, because once it was published, I was posting quite a lot on my Instagram, but not really reaching the numbers that I was supposed to get the Parliament to consider, which was at least 10,000 signs. And then to my surprise, in January this year, the Parliament discussed the contents of the petition in a session called ADHD Diagnosis, where some MPs came forward and spoke about their own challenges with neurodiversity. And it felt reassuring, it felt relatable, but moreover, it felt that the sparkle was ignited, or that we are actually moving the needle towards operating change. And I would love that people that are struggling with their mental health right now, or kids that don't know yet that the world is going to confront them at some point, that they have an opportunity to really understand themselves, come to terms with their neurodiversity, go on treatment, and be the best version of themselves. And we can do this. We have power to do that as a society. We just need to get the basics right. And once that is in place, I think a lot of people will benefit from that. Not only the young kids, but also the parents, the mothers that are struggling with their mental health whilst bringing up children, everyone.
So if I can play that back to you, and every credit to you for what you set out and are achieving. You've gone through your personal journey, you've gone through your difficult school years and your difficult years. You've come over to a new country to start again. Perhaps there's an impulsivity in there. And you've made a really good job of your career. You're doing really well. I want to talk about the Instagram and the fashion thing as well before we go. You've then gone through your own personal medical journey. You've sorted out your mental health to some degree with your ADHD diagnosis. You're on medical treatment for that. You've got organised. You've got a petition in government, which has now been debated in government. And that to me is the complete journey. That's from bullied at school to having your question debated in the UK Parliament. That's one hell of a journey, Marie. It really is. Now we get to this stage where you're saying not everybody should have, or people shouldn't have that journey. We should intercede earlier, and we should give people the chances that you got much later in life earlier. But there's an element of our decision makers in society saying, we can't afford that. We can't do it. So we're not going to do it. And how would you, in that debate, how would you push back against that view? What would you say to them when they say, we can't afford it?
We must afford it, and there should be ways we can afford it, because mental health should be a priority in this country. The stats are alarming, and there is data to back up how many people were struggling with going about their basic day-to-day life. By investing in individuals, especially young individuals that are going to the job market soon, the government is actually saving. There is a massive cost of unemployment in this country. There is a lot of people going on benefits because they can't make ends meet. And I think it's a perspective that we need to have as a society, that resources are there and they should be there. But how do we actually prioritize those resources towards the problems that are there? And this is not a niche problem. It's not an epidemic either, because you are born neurodiverse. You don't become neurodiverse. And I think a great pathway towards prioritization of resources and allocation of budgets is understanding what is. So the educative piece is really important, because you only understand something if you either went through it or if you can logically perceive how that works. And I think there is a lot of debate about neurodiversity online these days, but not as much as how does it feel to be neurodiverse, and how that impacts one's life, and what that impact generates to society on the long term. From a strategic point of view, if we wear the strategy hat, we understand that perhaps we are overlooking some aspects of this great civic engine, or that's perhaps it's something we never thought about, because we are a resilient country. We learned resilience in really difficult times. And we also learned to put emotions and feelings aside and keep going, because we have to. But perhaps we need to reaccess that strategy in prioritizing mental health in all sorts, not only for neurodiversity. Obviously, neurodiversity is a disability, so we need investment, special investment for that. But I think we have to step out of the due diligence tick, which happens quite a lot. Let's do this because it has to be due diligence. We have equality and diversity in our board, but we don't really feel that.
So you feel it because you've been through that journey. You're a woman of fashion. You've got a huge following with your Instagram, and you've turned your own energies, your success, your passion into something. Now, when you articulate, we have to fund this to get the best out of people, to add to society, to reduce the social debt and social burden. You are that epitome of where you can get to. You're holding down a full-time job in fintech, not easy, but you've also got your fashion aspect of your life and your Instagram. As a way to finish out this interview, just tell us about what that's all about, because I think that's another huge part of your success that needs to be championed.
Thank you. Well, I created London Fashion Today as a way to belong, because I came to London in 2015 as a Brazilian immigrant. I lived in Zone 3. It was quite difficult for me because I had a very privileged upbringing where I come from, and people knew me by my family name. I came to London. I was a number. I wanted that so badly. I wanted to not be related to anything. I wanted to be myself, and I started in a very challenging way, in a place I never been to. Well, I've been to London before, but never lived a long term. And I remember going on a flat share in Zone 3 and having to take all those cultural differences and take all that in and build a routine or a life for myself that defined me for who I am, or who I was becoming, or who I wanted to be. So it was a fresh start, a blank canvas, where I said, I want to work with fashion, I want to become someone. And because I had studied Instagram throughout my master degree and I came to London to study fashion, I thought I may as well start trying. And at the beginning, I was literally going to hotspots in London and taking pictures of people's street style, which was something I was fascinated and still am about. And then I was going to all the London fashion weeks, but my life, it was very there was very dichotomic because I'm living in zone 3, but I am going for fashion weeks, and these realities didn't match. But I felt that was temporary, that I belonged to where I wanted to be. I didn't let spaces, cultures, or places define who I was, because I had to do that, right? As a neurodiverse person, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be where I am.
There's a drive, there's a passion.
There's a visualization as well.
And the entrepreneurial spirit that we talk about and we've captured. So
back yourself.
So you backed yourself, to use your words, you've achieved that. And where is that now? Right now, where is that London fashion today? Where are you with that? How successful is that?
Yeah, so obviously the channel has grown since the past 10 years. I've worked with global brands within the UK and North America. I reviewed quite a lot of 5-star hotels. I was fascinated about traveling. And I was fortunate to be able to bring my eye to the narrative I was building in this channel, and to bring a lot of people alongside my journey by sharing that inspiration. London fashion today was like building a persona, because it wasn't my day-to-day life. And it felt somehow comfortable to build that, because I didn't feel I was vulnerable. Everyone is looking at this person that is probably very fortunate to travel every time and stay in 5-star hotels. I was literally reviewing 5-star hotels by my own and having fine dining meals by my own, and having experiencing things that people work really hard most of their lives to afford, or are just really in a great place in life to do it so. And while I was doing that, I felt empowered. I felt it was reassuring. I felt like this is the sign for me to continuously work on improving this. So there was a lot of storytelling, a lot of writing, which is something I'm passionate about, a lot of building an aesthetic and a visual that is captivating, but it also that has depth and slightly knowledgeable. It wasn't about following a trend, but sharing information, or sharing where you could stay in New York, or where you can stay if you travel to Barcelona or Milano or Paris. So I travel a lot within the main European cities. And by doing so, I think, within that journey, I got a lot of women replying to me and saying that they felt empowered to travel solo, or they felt empowered to create content for their own channels. So there was always a focus on beauty, on really looking at the world from a beautiful and exclusive angle.
So I'm going to play that back, and sadly we're going to have to end soon, but you've gone through a whole journey in your life of struggle, but passionate. You're holding down a full-time job, you've petitioned Parliament, and you've got London Fashion Today, which is allowing people to see the world is a beautiful place, and they can be a beautiful person in that place if they line up with themselves and demonstrate their empathy with themselves. And I would suggest that a lot of your success and a lot of your understanding of that has come from understanding yourself and your neurodiverse background, which has also driven you to do these things and given you that ability, that drive, that energy, that entrepreneurial
spirit. The lived experience that now empowers others.
Absolutely. Marie, I think you're the very embodiment of a woman that stands for what treatment can do for a person with ADHD, what diagnosis can give in terms of understanding for someone. And I genuinely think you should be on a pedestal for what you achieve and what you lead forward. And I think if there's anything we can do to help those journeys and those missions, we will do. I think I'm speaking for both of us. This has been an incredibly enlightening and delightful interview.
Yeah, inspiring is the word that
and I
comes
think
to
it
mind.
will inspire
You're
a
an
lot of
inspiration.
people when
Yeah.
this goes out. And not just women and girls. I think men will be inspired by your story as well. And I'm really grateful. We're really grateful for you coming in and giving us your time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure
It's a
talking to you.
pleasure
Thank
to
you.
talk to you today.